I'm buying batteries, so I write checks. And I can tell you the price has gone down 40% for me this year. And the prices say, you sure about that price?
The Lindsay oil refinery. It was a scandal, that revaluation almost 3 years ago, but you only got the effect of it in 2025.
The Tony Blair Institute are involved in a lot of things, but who's financing them? They should not touch energy. Tony Blair, if you see me, stop it.
Ladies and gentlemen, the year is coming to a close, and a lot of you have been asking, Alex, do you listen to any other energy podcasts? And the answer, of course, is yes. And the one I love to listen to is Redefining Energy. And today we have got an unbelievable guest. We've got the two podcasts together, a bit like Ferrari and Porsche, Lando and Max, or say two big majors of the energy sector coming together. Please, can we welcome Laurent to the podcast from Redefining Energy?
Well, Alex, thank you so much for having me and kind of merging our two efforts.
Now, it's been a very, very busy year, but before we jump into it, for my listeners that don't know your background, Laurent, just a little bit about your career, because there is a few decades of big-time experience there.
Yeah, so I've been I had an accidental career, a suite of accidents, just, meeting people and so on. But, by and large, I've been in the energy/environment for almost the past 30 years. And a certain number of things I've done way back when, like 25 years ago, I was at PwC. This is where we had the first inroads into carbon, climate change, and so on. And by chance, I was part of the first group who wrote what is now very famous, called the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is how you account for CO2. And, it's a long story, but basically, I was part of the group who coined the term Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3, which now everybody use or abuse.
Definitely abuse.
And then, so after in consulting, I went into banking, and I created a fund and traded clean energy, emissions, and so on. And that was the first in Paris, where I originate, because you might hear my accent, to London, working in investment banks. And about 15 years ago, I created my own investment company, which is called Megawatt X, and through which I have brokered and traded a certain number of wind, solar deals, batteries, and also invested in a certain number of companies and projects, which went quite well. So I managed to exit a certain number of those companies. So right now, my three verticals, I would say, one company is called Renewables, based in London, and we organize the whole trading of green power 24/7. So that's one. The second one are mobile batteries, which are used for events, filming sets, construction, EV charging, and that's going really very powerfully. And the last vertical, which I think we'll talk a bit later, is that crazy but not so crazy, ambitious but not so ambitious dream of connecting Europe and North America through HVDC cable.
Oh, awesome. And one question just for our audience. What was it like, that step? And I know it's going back quite a few years ago, going from sort of successful salaried employment to then making the big step of being essentially setting up a fund, setting up an investment company, but it was going to either probably be boom or bust. How did you cope with that? Because a lot of people listening to our podcast are probably in salaried employment at the moment, and that was quite a big leap to take at that point in your career.
Well, one of the biggest butcher of the 20th century, but sometimes you have to admit as good quotes, and it's Joseph Stalin. And I know it's better to quote Churchill, but he said in the Soviet army, it takes more guts to retreat than to advance. And basically, I didn't choose to leave. They closed the whole division. So I would have stayed, it was very well paid and profitable, but so I didn't have the choice. So I have to move forward.
That's brilliant. Just for the Redefining Energy listeners, I come also from the energy sector, but a very different background. So I've had a career sort of spanning across like Shell, Mabanaft, and then Certus Energy. And basically, I was always looking at whether it's importing or exporting fuel into the UK, whether it was then running big groups of petrol stations, building truck stops, bringing HVO in, and then we've both ended up in this world of podcasting in addition to our energy stuff. But also even today I'm working with companies that are looking to grow into the UK to put in fueling facilities and kind of want a tire kicker, and obviously just come off the Spectator conference. But our listeners don't want to hear about me. They want to hear about the year that's happened. So I'm going to throw you across the first question. Everyone likes to be a deal maker, but what were the deals of the year in your opinion?
Well, in my opinion, there are really two sectors that stands out. The first one is offshore wind, and the second one is batteries. And so offshore wind has been a bit of a meltdown. And it's kind of sad because, I love this industry. But if you look at what happened, the poster child of the sector was a Danish company called Ørsted. And Ørsted, was listed on the stock exchange, was in every ESG portfolio. And they faced a certain number of obstacles in the US, where they were by far the most committed of every developer. I guess a lot of guys, say, pat in their back and say, you're number one in Europe now. It's the world. So anyway, so they went literally overboard, and the Trump arrived and canceled a lot of projects, and basically they had to do 5 billion euro of impairments, which is a lot. And they had to raise capital. So there are two main shareholders are the Danish government, so that's fine. The other one is Equinor, which is the Norwegian oil company. But they had to do it at 67% discount. So yeah, so it's almost a bailout. And they had to sell 50% of the jewel in the crown, which is Hornsea number 3, which is a massive offshore wind park of Norfolk, to Apollo. So always investment funds arriving, and I'm sure making a very good deal along the way.
Yeah.
So yeah, that kind of illustrate now. Still, the sector continue to progress, but not as fast as a lot of politicians or academics or forecaster had forecasted. So it's great, and I hope they they'll fare a bit better. So that's basically, and look, if you take probably the last news on that sector is in Poland, where you have some excellent news, and Poland is developing a huge set of wind park offshore Poland. So this industry is down but not out.
And I think, as you say, a success story, because suddenly to raise 5 billion, it's not obvious that's going to happen. And we've seen companies before in that situation just fold, as you say, that they don't get the resource to continue the journey. Obviously, at the Energy Institute, I know Andy, and he's obviously senior at Ørsted, and we hope to get him on in 2026 to comment a bit more on the future and the growth. What was my deal of the year? I think my starting point would be, and you'll probably be hissing because it's a lot of both private money and state money, but I think it's needed for everything else to happen. For me, was actually National Grid finally reorganising, which was kind of happening through 24. And then in 25, we finally had the announcement. We've had Abby on the podcast. We've also sat down with various presidents of National Grid, including Cordy and Ben. and they are going to be investing 30.5 billion into the UK grid between now and 2030. And the reason for me that was an exciting deal this year was that essentially, if your grid is not right, all this exciting technology you want to turn on kind of comes superfluous. And back to your wind point, you know, we've been paying people to produce energy from wind, but there's been no grid to take it. So I'm hoping that that investment of 30.5 billion into the UK actually takes us into the next decade with a grid that sorts some of the frustrations out that we have today.
Look, I salute Pettigrew, who used to be the CEO of National Grid until, say, November. He's done an extraordinary job. Well, of course, if you compare to water companies, the bar is low.
Yeah.
No, but overall, National Grid is very respected around the world. They are one of the pioneers in new innovation around digitalization, around green enhancing technologies. And they also manage the largest fleet of interconnectors, subsea interconnectors. So they have interconnectors with Norway, Denmark, Netherlands, Belgium, 3 with France, 3 with Ireland. So they really have a world expertise. So I'm, if you try to get me saying bad things about National Grid, I won't.
Let's say some more good stuff, because we're talking about deal of the year. Is there anything from an investment side? Because obviously that's your world every day. What were some of the financial deals that you were very excited about that have happened in the last 12 months?
2025 was the year of batteries. The market grew by 50%.
Wow.
50%. And I can tell you, every big guys are on it. Every fund, the Carlyle, the KKR, the BlackRock, everybody's developing his own platform. And the reason why is twice. There's 2 reasons. First is the technology is getting better and better and cheaper and cheaper. Look, I'm buying batteries, so I write checks. And I can tell you the price has gone down 40% for me this year, minus 40. Every 2 months it's like, wow, a new form factor, a new supplier, and the prices say, you sure about that price? And the guy say, yeah. It's like, resend me the same price twice, So that is great. So that has fosters, and of course, so you install them fast, and it's the perfect counterpoint of what happened when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, yada, 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 that we heard all the time. It really strengthened the grids. And sometimes, you will say, I need another wire. But if you place batteries, in strategic location around the grid, it's much cheaper and faster than, putting some more wires.
No, I agree with that. And I think we've also seen it at the sort of certainly the big shows in Britain, like Solar and Storage, which has all the sort of battery companies from around the world in different parts of the sector. I'd say it's probably one of the biggest shows at the NEC. They then took the show out the Excel. We've gone about 5 or 6 times. We're fortunate enough to have the CEO of SunSync, the sort of British success story that's done a lot in Australia and so on. But you can just see that in terms of a world of electrification, batteries and off-grid solutions, there is going to be so much growth. And I think sometimes people focus on the element of China ownership, but what they don't focus on, the flip side of element, is how much is coming electrified through battery storage. And as you say, the cost is actually going down so fast.
Well, I think the China story comes from people who don't have a clue what they're talking about. Because 90% of the batteries in the world, the cells are done in China. So everybody imports Chinese cells, and CATL, 314 amp hour, and then you have EV, Gotion, Calb, BYD, and I forgot a few of them. But that's just one block. The whole engineering around, the cabling, the software, the anti-fire system, the inverters, all this is done locally. So whenever I buy a battery, the maximum content of Chinese is 15%.
Yeah.
and they say, the Chinese, they can switch off your battery. No, they can't. No, they can't. Look, I've got European software. Now, I can switch off the batteries if people don't pay my bills. But there are a lot of fantasies, especially everybody's having an iPhone in his pocket, which is made in China. You don't have a clue what's in it. That's all well and fine, but the batteries, people get very emotional.
Yeah.
Because once the battery is there, the Chinese are not going to steal it tomorrow. So it's there. Yeah. So I have a few, because this has been a worldwide phenomena. And again, we're talking about stationary storage, those big containers you see. I'm not even talking about the batteries in the cars, which is 8 times bigger. And because, otherwise that podcast would last 6 hours. But so I have a few, and so the first battery, and, you need to give credit to the guy, even if now it has become very controversial, is Elon Musk. 10 years ago in Australia, he put the first real battery, which was called Onsdale in South Australia, and it was 50 megawatt. And people say, oh, no, never going to work, blah, blah, blah. The stuff works. Now, in 10 years, the numbers have times 10. So now you do a 500 megawatt battery, which is like half a nuclear plant, and people say, oh, 500? That's it? So I've got the list. It's going to be a bit boring. But, in Australia, you've got something called the Waratah Super Battery, which is 850 megawatt. It's big, huh? The Queenbrook Rio Tinto, they've got 3 gigawatt of solar plus 8-hour batteries from CATL. Fluence, 500 megawatt, 4 hours at Tomago. So that's just Australia. Middle East, they like bigger batteries. So Masdar, 5 gigawatt of solar, 19 gigawatt hour of batteries. So that gives you a 4 hour. And that's done by CATL, Jinko, GA Solar. The biggest in the world, in Saudi Arabia, of all places, 15 gigawatt. So it's 5 times in Clay Point. Okay?
Unbelievable.
It's crazy.
Unbelievable. And I think what's unbelievable about it is that when we look at those deals of the year and talking about battery, in my world, in sort of downstream, I was very fortunate enough to sit down with a company called Windrose Technology and their CEO called Wenhan. And Wenhan, I like to start, he flew into London and he said to me, Alex, I'm fully booked for meetings, but I want to get my message across about how far battery tech has gone in trucks. Can you meet me in my hotel room at 11 p.m. at night? I said, why not? Why not? But the reason I'm putting them into deal of the year in a similar sort of environment of batteries is that everyone prior to this year was like, batteries won't work in trucks because you can't move heavy weights and you can do only a short mileage. And the thing, Wenhan has now released a truck that can carry 44 tons in Europe or 49 tons in the States and give you a range of 400 miles on one charge. So I feel that whether it's Windrose technology or some of the stuff you're talking about there, about whether it's the taking on the power stations or taking on the power units in cars, as you say, it's been a revolutionary year in 2025 for the battery sector, and it's been awesome.
Just people realize that, the price going down, the number of use cases are just going to go up. So I continue. So in the US, Edwards and Sanborn, 900 megawatt, Nova Power Bank, 700. You have this company called Base Power in Texas. They raised 1 billion Series C, 4 billion post money. And they're going to install battery in every home and connect them and manage them as one. In Europe, in UK, we've been pretty good. So we have this company, Nat Power. They have a plan. 1 gigawatt battery, 8 hours. Fidra Thorpe March, 1.4 gigawatt, 2 hours. Statera. In Germany, the biggest battery in Europe on a former coal plant. And that's, a coal plant is like dirty, you just put, and this is why they put batteries. Or data centers. This is one or the other. So LEAG, 1 gigawatt, 4 gigawatt hour. But everywhere, in Chile, in India, in China, I'm not even counting. So this year for me has been the where batteries got unleashed, and you can't put the genie back in the box.
And obviously, as a podcast, we can't give financial advice, but what would you say the market in terms of battery companies is quite like been sort of quite enthusiastic in terms of whether it's the high street investor or someone to say we can't give advice, but like what would you say is some of the sort of things that, you know, if you've got an ISA or fund and actually like the sound of what we're talking about, batteries, where's kind of a sensible place to say, you know, give it a go and see what happens?
Yeah, the thing is there are not a lot of pure players. You know, in batteries, people just use that technology. So of course the big one are in China. You got CATL, you got BYD. There's probably one or two EPC which are listed like Fluence. But you know, it's, you know, if you take solar, you know, the price has gone down. All the value has been given to the clients.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to. I'm not sure I want to be a shareholder of Jinko or GA or Longi, because they make big volumes, but they don't make a lot of money. So with the price going down, look, I don't. and once you know, people have cracked the code of what's a sell. So now there's so many people proposing very similar product with the commoditization. So I'm not sure as a shareholder I would touch it.
I think it's a fair point. I won't. The company will name nameless, but I was speaking to one of their C-suite members at Segalen Storage, really nice guy from China. And I was joking. I was like, your stand's 5 times bigger. I've seen your market size increase. I was like, you must all be driving Ferraris and buying massive houses. And he laughed. And he said, I think we've passed it all on to the customer.
Yeah, exactly.
So, one last deal of the year for me, and I think we might have a slight difference of opinion on this, but that's always good because we love debate. You know, a bit like my other hat on The Spectator, we love a sort of good old rumble. Is that I think really good news for Britain is the Sizewell C deal. You know, we haven't built a nuclear power station for 30 years. It's been a long time coming, energy security, but there's obviously been detractors that 38 billion has been signed off for this deal. And I have a feeling you're not a big fan of so much money going on one project, whereas I think it's really a good news story.
So I think putting a new nuclear plant is a good news story, especially considering that, you know, Britain used to have 15 gig like 30 years ago, and as these old plants have been decommissioned, even Hinkley Point C and Sizewell C are going to put us back 20 years ago. So it's more replacement than, you know, anything new in terms of capacity. And I think it's always a good idea to probably have 20% of the grid or 25. I mean, you know, it depends who you're talking to, you know, to have nuclear. Plus, it trains nuclear engineers, which are very useful for the submarines and the deterrence and everything. So, because, I mean, whatever they tell you, military and civil, they're very, very close.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The second thing is giving a blank check to the supply chain. I say, look, where is it going to be finished? Well, we don't know. How much is it going to cost? No, we don't know. Okay, it's fine. It's going to be on everybody's bill, and, you know, there's no control. So that's why I'm you know, when the government pays an auction for wind, you know, they're going to discuss for 10 pence.
Yeah.
But when it's the nuclear industry, it's, fine.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean,
yeah, be my guest.
I mean,
So if you really want cheap nuclear, you buy Koreans. So yeah. So the Korean option was never discussed for Sizewell C. It was discussed with the guys who got Hinkley Point. Okay, fine. What is it, like 10 years too late, 3 times over budget? So we're going to take the same, you know, it's what they say, Albert Einstein was the definition of insanity. Doing the same mistake and expecting a different outcome. So that's it. So my answer is nuanced.
I love it. Right. So, data centers. Everyone's talking about them. Everyone's saying, I swear we need data centers for crypto. We need data centers for banking. We need data centers for AI. But where do you think data centers and the energy relationship has moved to in 2025?
It has been a frenzy like we've never seen. There's been more money invested in data centers than in oil. And of course, if you look at the share prices of companies like Nvidia or you know, all the US hyperscaler, I mean, everybody's bullish on that. Now, I don't want to throw a wrench in that great optimism because I'm always on the side of the infrastructure investors, who are putting money into those data centers. But now the thing is, there's so much money absorbed that they have stopped using their own cash. They started borrowing. And everybody's got very excited because, they give a good return. But all this smells a bit like bubblish. or certain, I would say certain part of that ecosystem. The Google, the Amazon, they'll be fine. They have extremely robust cash flow generation. But around this, there's a certain number of companies which have aggregated to lend chips or lend data centers. And Mr. Facebook, you're going to pay me over the next 20 years, except after 4, you say, thank you very much, bye-bye. So that's what we're seeing. And now the markets start having a bit of second thoughts because the credit default swap, which is the amount of risk you assign to a debt, of certain of those guys is above Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka borrows cheaper than some of those actors in the ecosystem, which means that people are trying to.
I got that feeling when I was in the States this year. So I was at Climate Week. Everyone's talking about it. I did a year actually as a director of energy and AI company. And one of the facts that blew my mind about AI and data centers, the total spend on AI new investments in the last year was 380 billion. And why I chuckled at that, I was like, well, they always sell AI on in that you're going to reduce jobs, you're going to create efficiencies, that's where you bring it into your practices. I was like, you have to find a lot of efficiencies to find 380 billion of spend, and then you've got the ongoing energy costs to do it. And I guess what has probably also taken the energy sector a bit by surprise is how quickly people have adopted to it. So without any training or anything, every single human being I know is getting their reports done by it, checking every single emails they're doing it, up all the way to the likes of EDFs, finding out who are, vulnerable customers, right through to some of the work that I previously did, looking and working with the majors when they're doing oil production, about maintenance, through to getting your economics better. But I think the speed and the scale, as you said, then with the debt, creates a potential new age IT bubble, but actually we just call it AI optimism.
Look, it's great that every new innovation almost creates a bubble. What freaks me out is, they refer to the railways, they refer to the fiber. Yeah, but the fiber, which is on the ground, it's fine, you can use the same fiber for 50 years. You can use the same railway for 50 years. Now they explain you, that data center will be obsolete in 3 years. So you need to pay everything in 3 years. So that really what freaks me out. The second thing that freaks me out is the Chinese. The Chinese may decide to, give away the models because they don't care. So the Americans say, oh, yeah, you're going to pay, and probably their models are better. But if the Chinese give them for free, so I look, people have been evangelizing nonstop, and I buy half of the story, but as an old guy, there's a part of my brain who say,
I think the two things I was interested as well with data centers this year was that on one hand, I was meeting a lot of the industry planners that were very frustrated at the VAT rates in the UK. So it was actually making build in the UK and energy and the energy prices challenge. And they were like saying their fear was that it would go to other parts of Europe, especially because distance-wise it wasn't so big to bridge the gap. And the other thing I found fascinating, we had a speaker on earlier on in the summer called Rob Gramlich, who looks after various parts of the grid. And
the guy's brilliant. Is the guy who created PGM.
Yeah.
So yeah, Gramlich, big fan.
And he was like saying he's never seen such a power race between states within the United States, so like your Ohio versus your Texas versus your California, to be that place that secures the data centers. He said he'd kind of never seen anything like it in his career. And I was just wondering, do you think that's a sensible move, those states trying to be the home of the data centers, and whether, or does geography not have a huge impact? Because ultimately they're not huge job creators, but they are huge investors and huge energy users.
Yeah, and they're gonna provide a lot of local taxes.
Yeah.
So look, whether you're in the Midwest and it's extremely windy, or Texas, everything going to go in Texas in the end, because they are so much rooted in developing any type of energy. Yeah. So you can see Texas. Now, of course, there are other places where, for whatever reason, it start to appearing in everybody's bill, and that's not going to go very well. And if you're a politician, you say, I ban data centers, so you gain votes. So the thing is, I don't know. The thing is, it's fascinating. It's extremely fluid. It's not going to be 100% beautiful. I hope we don't have a disaster because people want a bit over their skis. Because at the end of the day, you're right. The technology is great. And the number of, the most two important discoveries. So it's not really about energy. It's healthcare. CRISPR-Cas9 in 12 years ago. Now, every lab uses CRISPR, gene editing. Yeah. Everybody uses it. It has changed the way you treat so much disease. And 2 years ago, you had AlphaFold. They had the chemistry Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
They know how to unfold every protein. And that's going to change everything. So, and I'm sure AI has a part, to do with this. So, I'm in healthcare science, the adventures are these are revolution after revolution after revolution. So I'm really in favor. Now, if it's just to those data center to run on TikTok and so on, but you can't choose. You can't say that's good, that's bad. It's just the fact that people are going to use those data more and more and more. So we need that compute, and I say speed, as you said, but. Whatever they say about the UK, they need power so much, So you're going to see them all along the North Sea where you've got a lot of wind. You need to see them in Scotland, and they say, oh, it's far away. Nothing,
I went on a family holiday to Alaska, and it summed up exactly what you're saying. So there was this area where a British bank, the Close Brothers, had raised the money for this gold mine. They'd built a beautiful railway that's still there to the day and is a lovely tourist attraction. And I have a feeling the railway is the most successful part of this operation. Thousands of people moved there for the gold rush, and now it's down to a few tens of people because it's a very derelict part of Alaska. But the actual gold ran out after 20 months, and the old joke that the people who really made money from the gold rush were those who sold the spades and buckets. I have a feeling it's going to be similar with AI, and we'll see how it goes. But we'll go on to a category I've been excited about all day thinking about it. Is the scandals. And we know as listeners that everyone will have a different view of how big the scandals are. But let's be honest, in the energy sector, you need people with big ideas, big proposals, but also you have big shocks and big news stories. So what do you think have been the scandals of the energy sector in 2025?
Well, for me, the most obvious one is the SMR, small modular nuclear reactors, which have gone to Wall Street. And there's two in particular. So you want quotes? I'll give you some. So there are two. I don't know why, but they looks like they're very close to the person sitting in the White House. They're like buddies. So we've got Fermi Energy, who did an IPO, and listen, they plan to put 10 nuclear plants in 5 years operational. And they raised $700 million, thank you very much, on a $13 billion valuation. And out of the $700 million, they gave away $150 million of charitable donation, if you see what I mean. Wink, wink. The other one's Oklo. They did a SPAC. But weirdly, the founder believes so much in his own propaganda that he sold $200 million of his own shares.
Wow.
Now, let's be clear.
In what time frame? Like very quickly after IPO?
Yeah. So, as Shanu Matthew of Lazar, who is one of the keenest analysts of all those, stocks, he said, non-revenue firm worth $45 billion betting on AI demand. Okay, so no revenue, no product, no project, no nothing. Well, thanks God, since the peak of October, their share price is down 50%. But look, it needs to go to zero.
Wow.
So that's, for me, that's the biggest scandal of the year. The SMR pump and dump scheme.
I think my first scandal of the year, and I'm quite sad by it because actually I've got friends who've lost jobs. It was a company I worked with for nearly 2 decades. But I think it's that classic that almost when someone has a little bit of success, it just gets bigger and bigger, and almost no one questions the momentum growth. And this was Prax with the Lindsey oil refinery. One of the things I found fascinating looking into the collapse, because it collapsed this year, was that in a sector that, let's be honest, has been losing money since the 90s, and most of the majors have done everything to either give away assets for hardly anything or walk away, especially small refineries. I'm not talking your mega refineries, but your small refineries. Suddenly, Prax come along in like 2020. They get this refinery at Lindsey. Then suddenly, what I found bonkers when I researched the case was the value suddenly jumped of them as a company, because apparently they were able to do vertical savings and benefits of petrol sales. I was like, wait a minute, all these other stuff the majors also had, but their valuation suddenly went into the hundreds of millions. They entered the rich list, the directors, and then on top of that, what I felt like it looked like to me was some quite junior accountants went in there during COVID because other people couldn't really root around the business because there's all the stops. And then suddenly people were loaning massive monies to them, but there was income drying up left, right and centre. And surprise, surprise, an industry that hasn't made money for anyone for 3 decades had a massive overvaluation during COVID, then goes pop. So for me, I was sad about it because I had friends who were personal employees and so on there. But for me, it was a scandal, that revaluation almost 3 years ago, but you only got the effect of it in 2025. Any other scandals your side?
Oh, yeah. But this one is a never-ending story. It was a scandal last year, this year. We're going to talk about next year. Is those... Okay, let's stay polite. Those very smart businessmen of a U.S. liquefied natural gas export terminal called Venture Global. So Venture Global, they are very well introduced in the White House and so on. They have an export terminal of gas in Louisiana at a place called Calcasieu Pass. And they were smart. They didn't have much money. So they went around to see the Shell and the BPs, the Japanese and so on, and said, look, we're going to export to you gases, but we don't have the money to build the plant. So can you give us long-term contracts, which of course are relatively cheap, but they are secure over the long term. Contracts which were signed in 2020, 2021. So they built the plant using those contracts as collateral. And there's always a little caveat is when the plant is almost finished, you let 2 or 3 ships come in, to check the meters, the pumps and everything. So then after you can become fully operational. So the first ships arrive, and it's the moment when you had the Ukraine invasion. The price went through the roof, and they realized that if they sell on the spot, they're going to get 3-4 times more money than if they respect the contract. And the loophole is, yeah, but the plant's not finished. There's a bit of paint there. There's a signature missing on a piece of paper. So the plant was finished at 99.99%, but not at 100%. And they managed to sneak not 1, not 2, not 5, 400 cargoes.
Wow.
400 cargoes. And the Shell and the BP were like furious, like, ma'am. So, and so Shell have been suing them. They lost in July.
All right.
But BP has been suing them and they won. So now everybody's hiring the BP lawyers. Okay, what's the trick? And they're on the hook for, I don't know, 5 billion or 7 billion. And
Wow.
so Venture Global,
Eventually,
the 400 ships.
I had a feeling something like that would happen because when at the time of Ukraine happened, I was filling about 1,800 petrol stations at the time, and sort of bridging into your world. I never forget that day. My Platts was at a price that in real terms was about 40 pence per litre. So it was costing me 40p more a litre to buy than it was costing the motorist to buy at the petrol pump. And I actually went down to the local Tesco's petrol station and took a photo because I thought it's never probably going to happen again in my career. And I thought, at a much bigger level, as you say, with a terminal, with that sort of grey period, it didn't shock me that this story came out because it was always bound that when you have such a big market move in such a short period of time, and also people suddenly putting stuff into cautions, and you can't buy Russian product here and you can't buy there. Almost due diligence, I think, was parked for a few weeks, and people did it. But it doesn't surprise me that those BP lawyers might have a busy year of other people coming to them. I think though one scandal I want to touch on is almost where maybe BP was a bit of the lose. And just to say that on the podcast, we respect BP hugely and a massive company, but it's been a difficult year in their boardroom. And I think that the one I wanted in that nothing so-called illegal went on, but more just a really difficult corporate environment in terms of you suddenly had this AGM back in March and we had Reuters on the podcast, and obviously Lund was the fall guy for kind of the previous decade of the green transition. At a very similar time, you had them announce that they were cutting energy transition from 7.5 billion down to 1 billion a year. And then we've just had, as we're recording now in early December last week and the last few days, that the big hydrogen dream of nearly, tens of billions into the northeast has been stopped rather abruptly. And Elliott Group seem to be suddenly defining BP policy. And obviously Elliott Group are big in BP, but they're big in P66. Do you feel that we'll see more of that in 2026 where big investors, whether it's Elliott Group or other people, will really challenge those transition numbers? Because the good part of it for BP is that in their latest results, there was a big bounce back in profitability. But a lot of people are like, yeah, this is the defining moment of energy transition that has to stand on its two legs profit-wise. Otherwise, big CEOs and chairs are going to be removed from boards.
Well, I'll tell you the amount that BP should invest in energy transition, and the amount is zero. It's not their job. Okay? It's not their job. They don't understand anything about electrons, and the energy transition is about electrification. So, period. Anything they wanted to do, someone else can do it better and faster and cheaper. And any subject. And then, of course, they went into those bondungle of hydrogen and carbon capture, which is just the vacuum cleaner for subsidies, because none of them are economic. They should concentrate, like Shell. People say, oh, Shell, they're a bit aggressive. Shell are real professionals.
Yeah.
They are, okay, we are 100% fossil fuels. If you don't like it, sell our shares. But by the way, we have a 8% dividend or something. So Shell, they are ruthless, but they are brilliant. And BP has been kind of a bit trend followers and that looks interesting and this and that. No, it's not their job. I mean, there are hundreds of funds, who invest very professionally in the energy transition, and they make money out of it. And you need to be small, you need to be nimble, you need to be fast. You don't need those big guys. They are. You have huge networks, huge oil platform. Every time the investment ticket is about 500 million, they're good. But putting rooftops on rooftop solar, EV charging, it's just too big.
Yeah.
So my thing is, in a way, it's good that they are going back to what they're good at. Because the rest, we don't need them. Don't squander money. Don't create the hydrogen council and you go to Westminster and try to to suck subsidy. No, just don't. Just focus. drill.
And we did have Michael Simmons on, the Spectator economics editor, who was a drill major. But before we touch more on a scandal that I've got from the North Sea, any other scandals your side, Laurent, that you think need to be labelled and people called out on the podcast?
Well, scandals, I would say more like disgrace. First of all, in terms of state capture, a guy should be knighted is the lobbyist for Drax. Drax is that big coal plant who's now doing biomass with supposedly wood chips, but nobody really knows where their wood comes from. They have managed to capture 10 billion pounds over the last 10 years, and now they're asking for 20 billion more.
It's big, isn't it?
It's this guy is a pro. I don't know how, the level of inside man he is. But people say, oh, our bills are too high. Stop subsidizing Drax. No, really. I mean, I don't know, put a gas plant there, batteries, data center, whatever, but stop burning Canadian forest. So that's number one. Maybe you want to talk about the Tony Blair Institute. Yeah, that's a disgrace.
Let's talk about the Tony Blair Institute, because they went for Miliband this year. So can you tell our listeners a bit more what the Tony Blair Institute is and where they really got right involved in energy this year?
Look, first of all, the Tony Blair Institute are involved in a lot of things, but who's financing them? Larry Ellison, so indirectly a bit, the Trump nebula, and a lot of Saudis, Middle East people, okay? So, and they publish a report which basically, if I can summarize, is, look, nothing that's being deployed right now, wind, solar, batteries, cable, nothing works. What is very important is looking into the future, and they propose a series of totally stupid technologies. And, they feel very about it. But it's interesting because Bill Gates think about the same way. And all this is influenced by a recluse Canadian academic called Václav Smil, who I'm always wary of those academics who has published 80 books in his life. So you wonder if he ever visited a plant. No, because he has a lot of authority. So I thought it's useless. And then they arrive, and of course they have a big voice because they have a big PR department, and they start saying, giving good points and bad. Frankly, they should not touch energy. Tony Blair, if you see me, stop it.
Yeah, Tony, we're welcome to have you on the podcast and really face some hard energy questions. Okay, I'll give you a scandal back. That's the current Labour government and not the previous Labour governments, right? And that for me is energy profit levy. Now, I obviously will totally hold my hands up on this podcast that essentially I am very fond of Aberdeen and what we do in the North Sea, because I think ultimately, even if Aberdeen is at 100% production, then we'd still be importing 50% of our oil and gas that we need. So I'm not talking about that it's a thing. And what I don't really want to do is that the split means that we import 90% of our oil and gas by killing off our own industry. So the big scandal for me is the energy profit levy. And why is it a big scandal? Is that I totally understand bringing in a profit levy when you are making substantial profits, and that's fine. And the situation in Ukraine that we already alluded to, you had poor government that shelled out a load of money, energy companies that had a quick bounce. I understand dipping in. But when you see in the last 12 months, hundreds of jobs being lost every single week, a real taxation situation of 78% for the area, but then on top of that, the likes of Harbour, the way they've invested stuff, meant over 100% of so on, and then having to lose jobs. Then I understand a government not acting straight away because they want to see over a year, but over a year they've been coming up and down to Aberdeen, they've been hearing the voices, they've been seeing actual redundancies, the likes of Apache leaving to America. And yet, in the budget, Rachel Reeves doesn't even mention it, and they're just sticking with it till 2030. And as the academic at Robert Gordon's Institute said to me, we have 95 countries on Earth that send people to learn about oil and gas at our university. There's only one out of the 95 that's trying to tax their industry close. So for me, that is the big scandal, is the energy profit levy to just hit the North Sea. Have you got any thoughts about that, Laurent?
Yeah, look, it's anything that's ideological is bad. And unfortunately, you've got a lot of ideology on both sides, because I hear a lot of stupid things coming from the right as well. So it's all well and fine when you are in the opposition, you make some grandstanding, but that's not reasonable. You have an industry, you need to nurture it. It creates job, it creates wealth, not global wealth, but local wealth. And sorry, what's the point destroying your industry and importing from Norway, which is 50 kilometers further down the pipeline, and paying top dollar not to His Majesty the King, but paying top dollar to the Norwegian, the wealth fund, because that's what's happening right now. So, yeah, it's sad because there's no economic rationale. Look, you milk the cow, you don't slaughter the cow. Simple.
And I would say to our listeners, in 2026, I will be going to ONS in Norway. Anything else on scandals, or can we move on to the sort of innovation?
Yeah, innovation's better.
So, guys, we are Good News Podcast as well. So there's been some really cool innovations. I would like to start just first off, a very small project, but I think it just shows that what you can do with a concentrated effort. Obviously, as a podcast, we're based in Wimbledon, and I was actually really impressed that the All England Club took really old infrastructure, a really old stadium, over 100 years old centre court, and with the help of Naked Energy, actually used modern solar and storage technologies to show that even an old institution with listed buildings and places can move forward the energy thing. But I think you've got some innovations that are really big scale and across the whole of the energy sector.
Yeah, look, everybody has been talking for years about how to use the batteries inside the car to reinforce the electrical system. And it's Greg Jackson of Autopus Energy who managed it. Technically, it's relatively simple. Well, when I say simple, nothing simple, but technically it's doable. But he has also managed it commercially. What I mean is Autopus Energy has done an agreement with BYD, which is the Chinese auto manufacturer. And in fact, they bundle energy and the car, and you pay a single invoice. And that is brilliant. And I can tell you, the whole world is looking into their innovation. Not technically, okay, fine, but it's really the commercial part. And of course, how do you split the money afterwards? So that's, for me, that's the innovation of the year.
And I think the innovation on top of that, in terms of actual practical kit, is that a company I've been very interested in. About 3 years ago, I was on a panel with their chief technology officer. There's a company called Yasa, Oxfordshire-based, British engineers, but bought out by Mercedes a few years ago. But the team stayed with investment. And what's amazing is they've gone from producing hybrid systems and electrical systems for hypercars like the McLarens and the Ferraris, to suddenly doing mass scale battery innovation and technology innovation that basically means that we've just seen on Harry's Garage, and he's a friend of ours, Harry Metcalf, there's now a Mercedes A-Class, so your typical standard company car that can do 500 miles on one charge, and therefore almost kill range anxiety, because unless you're going further than London, Edinburgh, which very few people ever will, essentially you've now got the mileage in very, very standard cars. As you say, on one hand you've got the innovation of Octopus, bundling it all together financially, and now that mixture of British geniuses with German clout, the average person can really enjoy innovation, and the electrification will happen.
Yeah. And also I'd like to praise the Chinese in the development of the batteries. Look, when I started buying batteries, they would give me blocks, which is they call 280 amp hour, which is about the size of a big book. And so when you get access to those containers, you see hundreds of racks of them. And beginning of the year, they said, now we have 314 amp hour. And now, after they went to 400, and now they finished the year at 587, which means that you can pack much more energy in each cell, which means less cable, less electronics, less, simpler cooling system. So they managed to double this year the amperage of each cell. And that is, look, it's not an innovation. It's the continuous improvement, but the speed at which it goes. You double capacity in 1 year. Normally in the industry you do plus 20% in a year. So ooh, here's you double. So it means the whole story around batteries, whether it's for cars or stationary size, is just beginning.
I think there's also two other innovators I'd like to mention. One's Prima Energy. I remember when HVOs came out about 4 or 5 years ago, everyone was like, this is another blended product. No one's going to buy it. I was involved in building one of the first HVO truck stops. Sales were very slow at the start. But the way Prima Energy have done their pricing model in the UK and support is probably going to be quite close to 1 billion litres in 2026. So they're on course for 800 million litres. And as a podcast, we like stuff that's mass adopted, like any technology where the example case is a few subsidised state vehicles is not cool for us. But when something's done in volumes of 800 million to 1 billion litres, you can debate about whether it's the end solution or not. And probably even Prima say it's maybe not the end solution. But for existing fleet to have used nearly 800 million litres this year is very cool. And then the other liquid one that I was very excited about and I've learnt a lot about in the last 3 or 4 months is Firefly Green Fuels. I've always been a bit concerned about SAF aviation products financially not working because company after company is starting on bust or they've put big investments. And what's very interesting is that basically Firefly have basically cracked that there's a big money costing industry that actually can benefit from SAF, and that's the waste industry in terms of all the waste in the water. And they're basically opening up in Harwich within the next year. And basically what they have done is rather than looking at it as an energy company supplying planes, they're looking at bringing in the water companies. And I see that they've signed deals with the likes of Anglian in the UK, and then also some of the big waste companies in the US who have this fundamental problem of all the waste in our water systems and the thing. So I think their innovation of trying to bring down costs in a sector that's always failed on it is an exciting space to watch.
Okay, so we're gonna have a little debate now. So why do you put SAF in jet engines? Why?
So I think this is the why, right?
No. Why governments say you need to blend 10% or 15% of SAF into jet engine? Why?
This is the why. The why is that at the moment airlines produce about 2% of global emissions. And ultimately, I think that whether you want to do business face-to-face, whether you want to have international families, or whether you want to go dreams, you're not going to get people flying less. And therefore, if you're going to take carbon out of flying, you need to think of ways of liquid fuel solutions at this time until other technologies overtake it.
So you're implying that when you burn SAF, you emit less CO2 than when you burn jet fuel. That's what you're implying.
Well, it's more about the total production from, I guess, instead of well to wheel, it's well to wing. And I would certainly say that we'd be more than up for looking at the calculations across the board because
I've done the math.
And I think it's now time to go into the quotes of the year because there's been some pretty big statements to you and I this year.
Yeah. So you wanna go first?
Yeah. So I've chosen one that was said to me in person. I was part of an audience rather than one-to-one or on the podcast, and it was probably actually like the most moving moment in the energy sector for the year for me was at International Energy Week in February. They had Maxime, who's the CEO of DTEC, and he
He's
said
a great guy.
He said a line to me that it kind of, you know, when someone says something that you just never experienced in your own energy career, and you're like, I can't believe individuals have to put up with this. And I think all of us were just like left with our mouths wide open. And he said to us about Ukraine, and for those of you guys who don't know DTEC is the largest private energy company in the Ukraine. And he sort of said this: energy security is about keeping a nation running. And not just running the lights on or making sure that you don't have trip outs, but it's keeping it running after you've had 200 ballistic missile attacks to your power stations. And your power stations have no walls. But we can say we have kept Ukraine running. And that's why, for me, that was one of like the most moving quotes of the year. And I think in the room of, you know, nearly 1,000 people, all of us just looked at each other and thought none of us have put up with that in our career. So that's probably my quote of the year.
It's a great quote. And, you know, Maxim Timchenko, correct? Yeah, the CEO of DTEC. I mean, the stuff they are doing, rebuilding their power plants and then keeping the light on. And everybody who's helping the Russians is a scoundrel.
Definitely.
Everybody. You know, I mean, Russians are toxic. So North becomes a Northwest Korea. Anyway, on a lighter mood, I've got a quote from Michael Sambales, who is the chair of the investment strategy at JP Morgan, and I read. So it's about AI spending. You know, we talk about it. The tech capital spending in 2025 is equal relative to GDP of the moon landing, the Manhattan Project, the interstate highway system, the electrification of farming, the Triborough Bridge, the Midtown Tunnel, the Golden Gate Bridge, and the Hoover Dam combined.
That is big money, isn't it? So do you think any of the AI products that are being invested in will be as round as long as those bridges?
That's what we all hope. But look, it has been a turning point. And of course, I'm going to quote the CEO of Saudi Aramco, who of course is talking his books, but he said, there's more chance of Elvis speaking than the energy transition plans succeeding. And I think that's where he's wrong. And I want to... Look, I'm not going to quote every report or book of the year, but there are a few words which have emerged and words which, you know, start to disappear. And for me, the most important word of the year, which now everybody uses, is electrostate. And it's a term coined by our friend Kings Milburn at Amber. And it really encapsulates, because there was petrostate, and we know what they are, but electrostate, you know, led by China and a certain number of countries in Europe, are basically guys who need to import their fossil fuels. So regardless of all the climate change debate, energy transition debate, they said, you know, if we electrify our economy, this is as much fossil fuel we don't have to import. And importing fossil fuel creates the possibility of blackmail, of energy insecurity. And even if you pay a bit more because you use homegrown resources, you know, that's where a lot of countries are heading. You know, sometimes they don't even aware of it. and sometimes also the conversation around the energy transition has been useful because it has brought budget. But at the end of the day, it's really about energy security and being an electrostate. So that's probably my word of the year.
Very good on word of the electrostate. I think that is a really, really powerful word. And I think also going back to Greg again, Greg was very clear at the Spectator Energy Summit that he felt by 2045 the majority of everything in China would be electrified. And when you see what they've invested into it, you know, whether it's storage, whether it's battery technology, you can have a feeling that almost they will be the dominator of the electric state, and fair play to them. So I've got a quote though of a politician I'm less happy with. Now, what I will caveat with is that the government have been very kind to this podcast. We've had most of the ministers on. We haven't had Miliband on yet, but we've had most of the other ministers. And Michael's very kindly come on the podcast as well. But Michael Shanks So what do I like about Michael Shanks? I like the fact that he comes to Aberdeen nearly every month, and in nearly every event he's there, and he takes questions and he puts out the government position. However, relating back to the energy profit levy, and this got me kind of frustrated when Michael said it at an OE UK event at Labour Party conference, and thank you very much for Labour making us official media people, but I have to call it out when I see it. And his quote was, "I love Aberdeen, I've been there nearly every month, but I'm not the Treasury." He was implying that he understands the problem with the energy profit levy, but he can't walk down the corridor and kind of make the Treasury here. Now, I appreciate that a politician can go to the Treasury and they can still say no, but I just felt with that quote, I was like, look, I hope Michael goes on to really powerful political positions, very amenable, very personable, maybe even gets the top job one day of Prime Minister, right? But what I'm hoping is that when someone sees a problem like Treasury, just like I'm sure in companies you've seen a problem of the funding stream, of how they fund it, there's always a way to get like motion and sort it. And what I didn't like about the quote, so it was almost the quote that annoyed me most this year, is I was like, go down that corridor, show the amounts of people that are losing their jobs, and someone will listen. But you're in there every day, unlike us who might meet you briefly for 10 minutes at a conference or see it. And I just want all of the politicians, whichever political persuasion you are, I understand the buck stops with the Treasury and how much money they let go and so on, but influence them to have a strong energy sector. So that was the one that annoyed me most this year.
Yeah, I don't think the approach is good. You need to go to the Treasury and say, look, I'm going to spare you 30 billion over the next 10 years. And by the way, can you please reduce the oil tax? And that they will listen. And they can say, 30 billion, how do we do it? Well, stop the drugs scandal, order Korean nuclear and not give a blank check to the guys, and all that CCS hydrogen corridors, for BP, just stop everything. Stop everything. and give back half of it to Aberdeen, and you can keep half of it. And and reduce the climate change levies or whatever. That's the way you do it. Arrive with solutions. And not just, I need more money. Everybody needs more money. So.
Well, let's end then the podcast on a happy note of solutions with the tones of the year. What are the tones of the year that you've enjoyed?
Well, what I've enjoyed is this commercial that was done by, what's his name?
Samuel Jackson?
Yeah,
Samuel. Yeah.
That was great. I don't know if we can swear here.
Yeah, we can always bleep it out, can't we, Adams?
It was really in support. It was a lot of slurs, and he was, of course, supporting the wind industry. Now, what is interesting is that it was sponsored by a Swedish company, the Swedish utility, which has also convinced Swedish government to cancel all the offshore wind licenses. Has closed his offshore wind department and is putting everything it had into new nuclear. So always a bit scratch the surface. I love the speech by Samuel L. Jackson, but Vattenfall, because I need to name it, they are not really keen on wind. They drank the nuclear Kool-Aid. So.
So the tones of the year for me are a few. Glory days of nuclear. I liked it when the IEA opened up various conferences this year and said it's the biggest year of nuclear use ever. I liked the tone of the year of solar boom, like we had the Energy Storage Association. I had big investors at Climate Week telling me what a great return on investment solar had been in the right conditions. So the solar boom. I also think a real tone of the year was suddenly climate, green transition almost had to face the accountancy department this year and had to justify the profit and loss. And then the other thing I loved this year was that however strong Miliband's convictions were, people gave it as good back. So it almost felt like it was Miliband versus the world this year, but it was a tone that provided plenty of content for this podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me. So who's going to wear the You want me to wear it?
I'm happy to close our final remarks.
You're great.
So, I really got to thank Redefining Energy for doing this joint end of year podcast today. We have covered deals of the years, data centers. We've looked at the scandals and joint end of year podcast today. We have covered deals of the years, data centers. We've looked at the scandals, and don't get me wrong, our legal departments are protecting us as we speak. Innovation of the year and quotes of the year and ending on the tone of the year. I just want to end the tone that it's been wonderful having on the podcast. And what have you guys got coming up in 2026 that listeners of the Wolfe Power Club would love to tune into and hear on Redefining Energy?
Well, we're going to continue exploring the various facets. I mean, sometimes we have big CEOs, and sometimes we've got young entrepreneurs, which we try to balance between Europe and the US, because there are a lot of different things happening on both sides. We have been invited at the Munich Security Conference by the BMW Foundation. So we're gonna delve more into energy security. And look, there are stuff of the decade, which they move very slowly, but they move. So just closing, I want people to think about the China-Russia power of Siberia too, which is like a lot of gas from Siberia is going to go directly to China, which probably is going to kill a lot of LNG export outlay. We have in Japan the restart of the whole nuclear industry, which was stopped after Fukushima. So it's same, for LNG, they're going to import less. We have in China, always China, the crazy 70 gigawatts. So double the grid of the UK. Dams they want to put on a river called, and I'm going to explode the Yarlung Tsangpo. But it's in the Himalaya, and it's just above Bangladesh. And basically they want to divert the water from Bangladesh. This one, people are going to talk about it for decades, because it's going to take decades.
On Wolfe Power Club in 2026, we're one of the media partners at International Energy Week. So when the world comes to London, we'll hopefully get some of the top guests on there. We're also doing a live one in April with UKIFTA Downstream Conference of the Welsh election, because the Welsh election is going to be the first barometer of where the UK general election might go. And we'll hear from the new political parties that are going there. And then we've also got, with The Spectator, they've confirmed the Energy Summit's going to happen again on Monday, the 30th of November, 2026. A date for everyone's diary. And I think we should get Laurent on one of the panels to debate with, suppliers of all different technology types. And I think my favorite would be Laurent versus Fermi. I think that would be a great session to have. And I think we'll try and make it.
If they make a charitable donation, everything's going to be fine.
So, guys, I'd like to wish both podcast audiences a very, very happy New Year. And thank you very much for rounding off 2025.
My pleasure.